All welcome. Excellent work on your calculus test. Very happy with your results. We've got a test for SPEC coming up, so it's going to be this time next week, isn't it? So we've got lesson today, lesson tomorrow, and you've got a nice long weekend. So you guys come back Wednesday next week. Awesome. So just on the conditions of the test, you get a page of notes and you get a graphics calculator. So that's good. We're going to have a notes page for every test from now on. Let's summarise the content. I think what we'll do here, let's open your textbook and let's just flick through it together so we're just familiarising ourselves with these things. So firstly, in chapter 2, there's a lot of this stuff that we covered in year 11, right? So if we've got 2A, B, C, I would say where we're talking about in 2A, we're just performing some basic operations with polynomials, adding them together and so forth. In 2B, we're finding the zeros, the roots, the factors of polynomials. And then in 2C, we're performing that polynomial equality. So a skill we developed in year 11 methods, although it does make it a fair bit more complex. Okay, so just operations, polynomial equality, all stuff we've seen before, but with a higher degree of complexity. In 2D, we learned, two different algorithms for division. We learned synthetic division and what's the other one called? Synthetic and just polynomial division, the division algorithm. Okay, so synthetic division and then the division algorithm. We're required to divide linear and quadratics. All right, so that was a new skill. In 2E and 2F, we did both the remainder theorem and the factor theorem. And like having had a substantial look at past exams, a lot of questions around polynomials revolve around division and remainder theorem. Okay? Remainder and factor theorem. In 2G, it's not a whole lot different from what you've done up here, but it ties in the complex number stuff. You know, if we have one of the roots is 2 take 3i, that means the other root is going to be 2 plus 3i, and you can find the real quadratic factor from that imaginary solution. 2i is just graphing of cubics and cortex, something we did a fair bit in year 11 as well, so not a challenging skill. And then in 2j, we're looking at using our calculator to inform us of one root and then finding the other roots of the cubic or quartic exactly. We didn't do H and we don't need to. Okay, it's not part of the course. Then in chapter 3 is a fair bit shorter. In 3A we talked about composite functions. So f of g of x, where we're talking about domain and range of composite functions and understanding when they exist and when asymptotes occur and so forth. In 3B, we learn about the inverse function. Okay, so that's a pretty important skill. That's something that pops up a fair bit. So inverse function has to pass both the vertical line test and the horizontal line test. Has to be 1-to-1. And graphing inverse functions, finding the inverse function, and so forth. Within the inverse function, a couple of people asked me about this. Not many people did, but 2 or 3 people asked me about some of the questions where you had to complete the square. Okay, so that's assumed knowledge for that. All right, so a couple of people asked about it. That was good. Maybe the rest of you got it. That was fine. In 3C, you learn about reciprocal functions, k on x. We learned that in year 11. In 3D, we did reciprocals of other functions. So that's when we have 1 on f of x, okay? And we are required to, it says it in the subject outline, required to sketch those both with a calculator and without a calculator, having a graph. So I might go through another way we can think about those a bit later today or tomorrow. Rational functions is where we have one function on top of another. All right, we need to be aware of when asymptotes occur. For that, we will have our graphics calculator to help us out. And then in 3F, we learn about absolute value functions. So we have f of x, the modulus of f of x, and f of the modulus of x. Let's summarise the resources we've got for revision. Okay, now it's not as simple as just giving you 5 tests. The reason is the course has been done a number of different ways over the past 5 years. Okay, So in 2018 and 19, they're the two tests that I've given you today. They did functions and polynomials together, chapter 2 and 3 together. So these are sort of the most relevant tests for us, okay? In a number of other years, so if you look at 17, 20 and 21, they just have a test on functions. So that's not, they're not useless to do, it just means you're missing the polynomials part of it. Alright, so you can still do them and still develop a bit there in the 17, 20 and 21 test. In other times they've combined polynomials with complex numbers, okay? Because you can see how they flow on to one another, can't you? Okay, you've got 2 take 3i, 2 plus 3i. We're assuming that basis of complex numbers that we learned in year 11, but that's the extent of it. We're not going any further than that, alright? So if you look at the complex numbers tests, except 18 and 19, so 17 through 17, 20, 21, you will find there some polynomials questions that are relevant. Alright, so all of the functions tests are relevant. I've given you specifically 18 and 19 because it includes polynomials. And then with the complex numbers test, there are selected questions from these ones that are relevant. Okay? If you're unsure, I'm happy to print them for you and happy to show you which they are. Alright, and then you can save the complex number questions for when we do the complex numbers test. We've got review sets for both chapter 2 and 3. And then at the end of your booklet, you've got a collection of past exam questions. So some of you have made a start on that already, that's fantastic. I've written solutions to them. I've lost it, I think it's at home, but I'll upload those. And we should find solutions to all of these things on the Google Drive. Okay, if they're not there, some of them aren't there, if they're not there, then I'll write them tonight. Alright, any questions? Okay, so I think I might hover around, find out if there's any common sort of questions. But other than that, yeah, it's sort of DIY revision. Let's do it.